Thank you all for coming. This is season 3, lecture number 6 of our public lecture series, Forward, ? The Wisconsin Idea, Past and Present. I am very thrilled to introduce our next speaker, and I just understood tonight that Hilary took over for Karen Bogenschneider, the person who spoke last week, after Karen retired. So Hilary led the Family Impact Seminars. And tonight Hilary is going to speak in part about a project she's working called Dream Up Wisconsin. Hilary has a complex appointment. You're in IRP, the Institute for Research on Poverty.
That's right.
But your tenure home is in La Follette.
No. So I was at La Follette.
Okay.
Now I'm at IRP, and I actually don't have a tenure home. I'm an associate director. I'm a staff member.
Okay.
There, so,
Okay.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Okay, that's okay.
But yeah.
Thrilled to have her. Ladies and gentlemen, Hilary Shager.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I was so thrilled to get the invitation to speak here. I'm a graduate of UW-Madison and a major believer in the Wisconsin idea, and have had the privilege to be part of it in a lot of different roles. So as Patrick mentioned, my job before I was at IRP was the Associate Director of the La Follette School of Public Affairs, which was actually put into statute as something that the university needed to make sure that we were doing the Wisconsin idea. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Tom, for overseeing. Thank you, Gwen, for the water. Thank you, Marilyn, for working on the tech. And let's go. So I have way too many slides and too much to tell you, so I'm going to zoom through a lot and know that I'm happy to have these posted. And there are a lot of hot links and ways to be interactive with the slides for those of you who are interested in kind of digging in deeper. But what I want to talk about today in my role as the Associate Director at the Institute for Research on Poverty is I want to talk a little bit about who and what we are. How many of you, before you got the syllabus, had heard of the Institute for Research on Poverty? Okay, so pretty many here, but not everybody. We've been around for over 50 years on this campus, and we are truly the Wisconsin idea in action. So I'm really excited to talk about that. And I want to talk about a little bit about our history, but then I want to talk about 3 projects or facets of IRP that really, I think, illustrate the Wisconsin idea at its best. So we are the only federally funded national poverty center in the country. We started that way, and that's where we are now, so I'll talk about that. I'll talk about our work with Wisconsin state agencies. So before I came back to UW as an employee versus a student, I was a research analyst at the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, and that is one of the organizations that we work with very closely to do work benefiting the citizens of the state. And then I will talk about Dream Up Wisconsin, which Patrick mentioned, which is a really exciting, new and very local project that's unlike anything we've ever worked on before. So that's the tickler there. And then I want to talk about ways that you can help us realize the Wisconsin idea going forward. So just really quickly, the Institute for Research on Poverty, we're located in the Social Sciences building on the 3rd floor. We were established in 1966 during the War on Poverty. And essentially what happened is, and I'll talk about Lampman, who is our founder. The government was interested in the War on Poverty, and they wanted to know how can they do that. And they decided that what they needed was something like a RAND Corporation, like what RAND Corporation had done for the Defense Department. They wanted someone to do that for poverty. Someone outside of Washington, someone who could be outside the politics and do the kind of research. And that's how we were born. And we function as an independent and multidisciplinary center located within the College of Letters and Science on campus. And our core infrastructure funding comes primarily some from UW-Madison and some from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And then we also have over $20 million in research grants from various foundations, state and federal agencies that we run. So we're not a degree granting department. We're an institution that is made up of faculty, staff, but we do provide training for students as well. So we are the Wisconsin idea. We really are. What we're trying to do is we're trying to understand the causes and consequences of poverty and inequality, and we do that through our research, through our training, and importantly, engaging with policymakers and practitioners. We do not sit in an ivory tower and do research. We are on the ground really working with the people who are having to make political decisions, who are having to implement programs on the ground, and that's why we do well, and that's what makes our work important. And then we also try to do a lot to disseminate evidence. So it's our dream, our vision, that all of policy and practice, much like Karen was here saying last week, is informed by evidence, and that those policies will eventually lead to the reduction of poverty and inequality in the U.S. And so how do we do this? As I mentioned, we have aspects where we talk about research, training, policy, and practice. We have about 25 staff. And we have about 200 faculty affiliates. About half of those are on campus. About half of those are at other universities across the United States. And we have 8 institutional members of something called the U.S. Collaborative Poverty Centers. And this is a group of other universities like Stanford and other places. I'll show you a map in a minute, that we work with, that we have connections with, trying to do this focused kind of research. As I said, we do grants. We have a lot of collaborative relationships with policymakers and practitioners. And then we are also really trying to train and support a diverse, very interdisciplinary core of poverty researchers. And that's something that, especially the diverse part, and diverse in terms of racial, ethnic background, their discipline, what topics they're studying, region of the country. That's something that we've really been trying to work on because it makes the work better. So this is our logic of collaboration. It's a pretty simple model. It's a circle, right? So we are here with our lovely university resources and technical expertise. We have a long time horizon that we can do our work in and adequate funding. And then we have all of the really important on-the-ground state, federal, local agencies and partners that we work with to get our work done. And it really is a feedback loop like this. And so I'm not going to go through all our questions, but these are some of the major questions. If you had a chance to look at Chancellor Blank's brief history that she wrote for our 50th anniversary a few years ago. These are some of the major questions that we've been working on. Of course, we're adding new questions every day, and at the end of this, I'm hoping that you are going to tell me some new questions that we should be thinking about. I am here to put the Wisconsin idea in play and go back to my agency and let people know what you're thinking about. But essentially, you can see that we work on social policy, broadly defined. And this is our current leadership, and I just want to give a shout out to our amazing director, Lonnie Berger. And then we also have Jeff Smith, who's fairly new at IRP, and Becca Schwei. And I throw this slide up here not to test your eyes, but just to show you some of the faculty on campus and what I mean when I say we're interdisciplinary and how important that is to our work. So we have professors from social work, from political science, consumer science, economics, law, demography. We have people, maybe not on the executive committee, but who are affiliates from computer science, from business, from education. And again, that is the key to our work, that you have a bunch of interdisciplinary scholars working together to solve these really thorny problems. And again, our org chart, the only thing I would just want to show here is kind of who we have working at the Institute and what kind of jobs we're doing. So we have an arm, of course we have management and all that kind of good stuff. We have students, but we have communications and dissemination. We have, of course, the administrative services, but we also have a research and data services arm. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the incredibly rich data resources that we have. And we also oversee journals and postdocs and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So the other part of who we are is we're part of a network. We're part of this collaborative of poverty centers throughout the country. So these are, premier centers. We work as the hub, and we try to leverage different specialties that each of these poverty centers may have. For example, we just worked with Kentucky on a conference about rural poverty earlier this year. And so each of the centers have sort of different things that they work on, but we all work together to try to, again, sort of solve some of these thorny problems that we have surrounding poverty and inequality. So I wanted to just kind of put us in a little historical context. So there were really kind of 3 generations of Wisconsin idea pieces that led us to where we are today. So we had the Wisconsin School, really at the turn of the century, and Richard Ely and John Commons, who were, social science was kind of this new field of research. And so they worked on issues like workers' compensation, unemployment compensation, and the state income tax, and really kind of led the way at that early time. And then the second generation, these were some responses to the Great Depression. So we had Edwin Whitty, and he was called upon by Franklin Roosevelt to work on the Committee on Economic Security, and he was basically responsible for coming up with the Social Security Act. So all of the National Labor Relations Act, all of these things were happening in Wisconsin, in the early 1900s, and again, it was the Wisconsin idea and led to putting us in a really good position when the War on Poverty came around to say, hey, where could we put that rand somewhere in the country? Well, here we have this perfect place in Wisconsin, and Robert Lampman really brought it here in the 60s and got it started. And so the idea of having a national poverty center, I really like this quote from Robert Lampman. He talks about why have a center? Why not just keep, having projects? And he talked about how it's really important that you reach a critical mass, that you really want to have this whole group of people that are working towards common goals, working on common questions, working interdisciplinarily, and really trying to play off of each other, again, to do this kind of work. And so we've been a national poverty center off and on since the 60s. So back in the 60s, we were the only one. Over time, there would be different types of federal grants. Sometimes there were multiple poverty centers throughout the country. We were one of 5. Now it's back to 1, and we got the single grant a couple years ago. So we have this ongoing 5-year cooperative agreement with ASPI, the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation within Health and Human Services. And so our goal is to work with them to try to again, increase the effectiveness of policy via research and training and dissemination. And I will say that the ASPI grant, although it's very important to us and crucial to who we are and our identity as a center, it's not the only form of funding. It's actually, kind of less than you would think. And so, I'm going to talk about some of the ASPI-supported research activities, and then I'm going to talk about sort of some of the other kinds of activities. But all of them do the work of the Wisconsin idea in trying to get that information out there. These are some of our research activities, and I think, what I'd like to point out here is that we have a number of grant and re-grant programs where we'll work with ASPI to come up with a good topic. So we've had grant programs on child support, on child poverty, and again, we'll work with all the centers to try to move the needle on some of those kinds of things. A lot of workshops and different pieces like that. Some very cool research studies that we're doing that are outside of ASPI, but nonetheless very exciting. So right now we are part of the Child Support Non-Custodial Parent Employment Demonstration, which we call CeaseFed. And this is an 8-state study, a randomized controlled trial, so a very big deal, very big study, has been going on for several years. I actually helped write the grant when I was working at DCF at the Department of Children and Families to partner with us. Looking at if we sort of change the idea of child support from a collection agency to more of and think about why are people not paying? Is it that they're criminals and deadbeat dads, or is it that there are barriers to employment or actually paying that we could try to address to improve payments? So it's a real kind of cultural shift in thinking about the child support program, and they're testing that kind of program in 8 different states, including Wisconsin. One of our professors, Catherine Magnuson, is working on a study called Baby's First Years. This is a really exciting study where it's a randomized control trial where they literally are going to give low-income mothers money, about $4,000 total in a year. It comes on a card, about $300-some a month. Not going to tell her how to spend it. It's just literally to test, does income improve outcomes for kids? And they are doing all sorts of things like brain imaging, because there has been some work suggesting that poverty impacts early brain development. Here is a way to truly test whether just money, just income, makes a difference. You'd be surprised. We think we know. We think there's a theory, right, that poverty matters and income matters, but there's actually very little empirical evidence that that is absolutely true. There are a lot of confounding factors we can think about, right? And then another program that we've been working with the JPB Foundation, again, this is the thing that I get most excited about, is trying to do researcher practitioner partnerships. So here we're trying to really build relationships like the ones we have in Wisconsin with different state agencies and universities, and trying to use all the big data out there to really to make a difference. So we funded 2 projects this year. One is in Milwaukee, where they're looking at Carolyn Heinrich, who's now at Vanderbilt, but she was here at Wisconsin. She's looking at the increase in online learning that's happening in the Milwaukee school district. So now something like 40% of students take credits online, and the concern is a lot of these credits are to make up for problems that students have had, and they tend to be taken by kids who are at risk of poor outcomes. So African American students, low-income students, Hispanic students, and it seems to have helped to raise graduation rates, but we don't really know if students are learning anything in these programs. So this is a really cutting-edge study to look at what do their employment outcomes look like after school, and how's that working. And then we have another one going on in California where they're looking at things like little behavioral nudges like texting, and seeing if that helps people get the benefits that they're eligible for, specifically the EITC, or if we make it easier to sign up for SNAP, or make it and that's what used to be called food stamps, that program, whether that is helpful and people get the benefits that they need. We also have a bunch of thematic research networks. So again, this was work that kind of grew out with trying to spread that network of poverty scholars and with the collaborative. And so right now we have networks around specific topics like poverty and geography, family functioning, employment and self-sufficiency, the transition to adulthood, and tax policy. Okay. And so I wanted to point out another project that we did, again, a Wisconsin Idea kind of project, which was this 2-volume Journal of the Social Sciences for the Russell Sage Foundation. And this was essentially the best researchers in the world on these topics, putting the evidence out there. So this is very much in the vein of the Karen Bogenschneider and the Family Impact Seminar, where it's like you let the evidence speak for itself, right? We're not advocating, it's here's what we know about what we think could actually impact poverty. And so this was edited by several UW faculty members. So highly recommend this for your reading pleasure, but it was way, way too long to put on the reading list, right? Okay, so I talked about research. Next I want to talk about dissemination. So this is really important, and I know Karen talked about this, and this is something I'm very passionate about too, that it's one thing to do the research, and that's really important and for it to be out there, but it's another thing to make it accessible and palatable for policymakers and people who are trying to run programs and help others. So we are working really hard on this. I think we have a lot of talented academics at this university, but this is a different skill, as I'm sure Karen discussed. So this is a different skill. We have a lot of staff who work on this. We have several editors. This is something I try to work on quite a bit in working directly with policymakers. And this is something that when we're working with the feds, they were very interested in some of our models that we had. And this latest agreement has some activities built into it that are really new for this Federal Poverty Center grant. So for example, learning exchanges, where we go to DC and they pick a topic. They pick the topic, not us sort of shoving something down their throats, right? They pick a topic that they want to know about. We find the best expert. We talk to this expert about how you talk with policymakers, and then we go and do the learning exchange. We have some quick turnaround kinds of things that we're doing for ASPI, and again, this is new. Again, they're like, we need to know about X. And so we get some graduate students, or we talk to somebody else at one of the poverty centers that is an expert on this, and try to turn around these kind of quick memos. We have several publications, and we're trying to revamp those to make them more publicly accessible. And the thing I always talked about and learned from Karen and from working in that program, working at La Follette, it's not dumbing it down. That is not what we do. The truth is policymakers and people who are running programs are busy and they have other jobs. And so it's my job as someone who's disseminating this research to get to the point and figure out what information they need. And that takes some time. That's a real skill. We're also trying to break out and do more, and thank goodness we have some young people working for us, right, on more of the podcasts and webinars and social media as well to bring in the new generation. So I just wanted to point out a few of the kinds of events that we run. So we have weekly seminars that we would love to see you at every Thursday. At lunchtime, you can bring your lunch, and this is a tiny calendar, but again, hopefully you can see this online. And this is a mix of both UW scholars and scholars from across the country talking about various topics. We also have something called the Lampman Lecture, named after our founder, and New Perspectives, where we try to bring in, we look at something really kind of cutting edge that hasn't been done before. Last year for Lampman, we had Richard Rothstein, The Color of Law. It was fantastic. So we're still setting these up, but we have, for Lampman, we have Bruce Western coming in, who just wrote a book about the year after it's the transition from prison back to the community that I think is going to be fantastic. So this is a collage of many of our other kinds of activities. And I just wanted to point out, for example, that one of our latest podcasts is about working with Beth Vade, Carrie from the Madison Metropolitan School District, Carrie Lawton from the Department of Public Instruction, and Eric Grodsky, who's a sociology professor and IRP affiliate, on working on those research practice partnerships in education. So again, not only are we doing it, but we're also trying to talk about it and think about the process and make that better. We also have frequently asked questions. I'm going to ask you for some of those at the end, so be thinking about what we could add there. We have an upcoming webinar that I think is going to be really interesting on a very hot topic right now, which is work requirements in the safety net and the challenge of implementing those. So that's coming up at the end of October. And then we have our 3 sort of main publications, IRP Focus, which is about, it might summarize anywhere from 2 to 6 different articles. And then we have Fast Focus, which is the 2-pager version of that. And then we also have fact sheets that are actually put together by undergrads in an internship program that we have. So again, trying to reach different audiences at different levels. Some of these are really good for those of you who might be teachers out there. Especially the Focus is really used to try to be a good classroom tool. Okay, so I talked about research, talked about dissemination. Now I want to talk a little bit about training. So again, we are really trying to diversify poverty scholarship, and we think that that's really important. So we have programs, although we don't have any classes per se or don't grant degrees, we have some different pieces for undergraduates. We do have a graduate research fellows program for grad students, and again, this is an opportunity for students from across disciplines to come and talk weekly with colleagues, and having gone through that program myself, it's wonderful to see things from a different perspective. We do have some postdoc programs. We bring scholars in to stay here and interact with them. And then we have a few different things for faculty, including every other year we do a Teaching Poverty 101 workshop. So this is, we bring people in from across the country to talk about how do you teach about poverty, and that's been a really great experience. This is one of the new programs that we developed with the ASPI funding, and this is a dissertation proposal workshop for underrepresented students, and this is a partnership with Howard University in DC. So we've done this for the past couple years and do have it in the budget going forward, where we're trying to work on and provide mentorship for new emerging scholars. And just today, we were talking with scholars from our other program that's funded, again, by the JPB Foundation that I mentioned earlier. And this is where we find promising junior faculty and give them some professional development money. And what's unique about this is it's just, here's a check. It's not attached to a research project. It's what do you need to do in this next year to further your career. So some of them are using it for training, some of them are using it to do research, some of them are using it to pay themselves in the summer, to travel, different things. We were just talking with Jamila Michener today, and she's just fabulous. So if you have a chance, check out their work. And then another new thing that we started this year, which is an undergraduate program, is this Shepherd Higher Education Consortium on Poverty. So this is new for UW, but I think there are about 35 to 40 universities involved in this. And essentially it's trying to get undergraduates training in poverty-related studies, and also to provide them with high-quality summer internships. So more to come on that. Okay, so now I want to get into the very Wisconsin idea-y stuff that we do more specifically, and the 3 projects, or the 2 projects I talked about. So one of the things, so I was at La Follette for 4 years and loved it, but when this opportunity at IRP and this job came up, I had to go after it because it was sort of like my life come full circle. So when I was sitting at the Department of Children and Families, it was my job to work with IRP from the standpoint of the agency. Now I'm the PI for this contract at IRP, working with people who have my old job at DCF. So it's awesome. But we have arrangements with several state agencies, and the really important philosophy is that there's a yours, a mine, and an ours. So this is not about us doing research and giving it to an agency to implement or think about or learn from. This is about really sitting down and listening. So I know Karen talked a lot about listening last week, to what do you need? You know, what is really going to get us there? And so we spend a lot of time with various heads of agencies, with legislators, with program and subject matter experts, and we develop a shared research agenda. And part of that is, there has to be in there some things that are mine, right? So these are academic researchers. So some of the stuff they're going to have to be able to publish in a journal somewhere. Some, right? And some of the stuff is going to be research that they will never publish anywhere. But the department needs to know. The department needs to know if this program's working or what they can do better. And then there's ours, and those are the really exciting projects that maybe start out in one of those other categories, but it turns out that they both improve things for the agency and also provide some really rich addition to theory and practice for academics. So the kinds of contracts that we have with state agencies include both technical assistance contracts. Like I'm going to DCF to do a Program Evaluation 101 workshop in a few weeks. I spent the afternoon there working with their youth justice section that is trying to implement a new assessment tool. And some of these are research contracts where, again, we sort of develop this agenda, especially with child support at the Department of Children and Families. We have one with the Department of Public Instruction, some with health, where we're trying to answer specific questions. We often have partnerships in seeking federal grants. I've talked about the learning exchanges in brown bags, so those happen quarterly, where we go in and have great discussions, kind of give them results, but then also hear their ideas and their reactions. A lot of our faculty participate in the Family Impact Seminars and Committee Connect, and we do work directly with legislators and go in and talk with them. And then we have this incredible opportunity because we have built these trusting relationships where we have data sharing agreements with a lot of the state agencies and are able to link those departments' data together to answer really important questions that are difficult to answer if you're only looking at data from one program. So I want to give a few examples of things that we've done through these relationships and through these kinds of agreements, collaborative agreements. So we've done the most work, I would say, in child support. If we kind of go back in time, there was the child support demonstration evaluation, where we were looking at the question, families, especially from low-income backgrounds, you have two parents, the non-custodial parent, so child is not living with that parent. That parent's supposed to be paying child support. They aren't paying child support. Why is that? What can we do to improve it? And one of the things they found is that for some of these low-income families, if let's say, we'll just say dad, but could be mom, is the non-custodial parent, they're paying, say, $100, and turns out like 99 of that actually just goes back to the state because it was a Medicaid birth or because mom was getting welfare or something like that. And what they found was that this actually is a disincentive for some parents to pay. And so they did an experiment. They said, well, what if we passed through, if we made sure that for that $100 that's paid, it actually goes to the family, to the kid. Could that improve things? And what do you think they found? It did, right? Okay. It may seem kind of obvious now, but it wasn't, obvious at the time. And so several states have changed their policies around that. We also did a pilot of a debt forgiveness program. So again, kind of looking at why aren't, and this was sort of based off what they found with the pass-through policy. What if we had debt forgiveness from the state? So for every dollar that a parent paid, the state would forgive $1. Would that help to bring people back into the system? And sure enough, it did. There have also been some studies on the interaction between child support and child welfare. So same kind of idea that in some instances, a child is put into foster care and the child support was actually used to pay for the foster care services. And the problem was that was actually sort of an incentive for people, for agencies to keep kids in foster care longer. Not good. Not a good outcome. But again, these are questions you wouldn't be able to ask in sort of a siloed program. And I've talked a little bit about CeaseFed, which is the program that they're looking at now, that how do we think about employment outcomes in relation to child support, and also fatherhood programs are a part of that as well. So I just want to show you this diagram because the data that we use is really unique. It's one of the best systems in the country in terms of having this kind of linkages. So we have data from all sorts of places. What used to happen is you would basically draw from one of these circles and try to then match with another circle. And now we have this data system where everything's matched already. So you can really look at sort of the interactions between these different kinds of programs. And it's become pretty extensive, our data core. It's expensive and it's hard to use, and it's hard to keep up, but it's something that we continue to try to improve and are really known throughout the country for having. Another thing that we do annually is the Wisconsin Poverty Report. So Professor Tim Smeating has been the lead author on this since he was the IRP director several years ago, but continues to do this. And this is where we, instead of just looking at sort of the federal official poverty measure, we try to do something that makes it a little more policy relevant and specifically for Wisconsin. So it's a slightly different poverty measure that takes into account some of the non-cash benefits and adjusts for the cost of living differences in Wisconsin. And looks at. So it tracks with the official poverty measure, but hopefully can give us some more specific information about what we can be doing better in our state. And just to give you the headline from the 2018 report, which if you see 2000, it's because it uses 2016 data. So it takes a couple years for this data to catch up. But essentially found that despite the fact that we have a growing economy in the state, we basically have no reduction in poverty, and in fact, it went up a little bit last year. So that's trying to tell us, like, these low-income families are not being able to sort of capitalize on some of the growth that we've seen in the economy. Why is that? And how can we explore that better? And this year, Tim added a Milwaukee County supplement specifically looking at poverty by race and ethnicity, and unfortunately finds quite a bit higher rates of poverty for blacks and Hispanics in Milwaukee. So this is another thing you can take a look for. And so we also try to, it's really important to us to be good citizens and to try to be part of these groups that are really working to answer these questions and to think about better policies. So this is a very abbreviated list of some of the different kinds of councils that we advise on, that both faculty and staff have worked on. And they're everywhere from local, like United Way of Dane County, to the Commission on Evidence-Based Policymaking. Okay, this is so cool. I'm so excited to talk to you about this project. So when I moved from La Follette to the Institute for Research on Poverty in March of this year, Lonnie Berger, the director, had just been approached by a group called Schmitt Futures, which is I probably should have showed this slide first. Schmitt Futures, which is a venture facility for public benefit. Don't ask me exactly what that means, but those are their words and we're sticking to them. So it's not a foundation, it's not a venture capital organization, but it's headed by Eric Schmitt, who's the former CEO of Google. And they have funded a lot of very science-y kind of stuff, like artificial intelligence and science fellowships. but they really are interested in getting into the business of increased prosperity. They had approached Chancellor Blank and said, we're looking at universities across the country to be part of this adventure with us, and we think Wisconsin could be in the running. And Chancellor Blank said, I have just the place that could do this kind of thing, and went to Lonnie and give it to RP. And just to give you an example, so mostly we have worked with a lot of federal grants and contracts and things like this. This organization said, well, we want a 5-page proposal in 2 weeks. Okay, so usually if anyone's worked on a grant, it's like 120 pages, over six weeks or whatever. But yeah, we want 5 pages. So I came to RP right when this was all happening. The happy story is that Wisconsin was chosen as one of the 4 inaugural partners for something called the Alliance for the American Dream. And the challenge for the Alliance for the American Dream is daunting, but awesome. How can we raise the income of 10,000 middle-class Dane County families by 10% by the year 2020? So I just want to show you a little video that we did with, well, if I can here, whoops. Maybe, if I can find the, oh, there it is. I got it, thanks. Okay, so here we're going to explain the project a little bit, and then I'll talk about it.
Dane County has beautiful landscapes, vibrant communities, a strong economy, and a thriving labor market. But many families find themselves strapped and struggling to make ends meet. Increases in the cost of housing, childcare, and education stretch family budgets, while wages for some seem stuck. These struggles are especially prominent for people of color, who have unemployment rates that are often double, and median household incomes that are substantially lower than those of white people in Dane County. Opportunities also vary by education level and geography, leaving too many people in our county out of the middle class. But think of how much stronger our community would be if we could expand Dane County's middle class. Dream Up Wisconsin aims to do this by building on current efforts, combining university and community partners, and using funding from Schmitt Futures to find ways to boost the incomes of 10,000 Dane County families by 10%, or around $4,000.
That's $40 million a year that we're going to see ripple through our economy. That's spending in local businesses, that's people saving, people investing.
What does it mean to be middle class, and what can we do in this project to expand the number of middle-class families here in Dane County are just fascinating questions and deeply, deeply important for our community.
We are excited to learn from you about what the ideas are that'll help the middle class here and elsewhere.
The strategies used here in Dane County are scalable particularly if you're tied to industry partnerships.
And we're excited to support those ideas and hopefully give them access to the market and the capital they need to thrive.
I hope there is a more cohesive, collaborative community vision for who we want to be and how we're going to get there.
We're really trying to start by listening to the community. We're going to listen. We're going to work with faith-based organizations, with local businesses, with policymakers, with teachers, with unions, with everybody in the county who's worried about the issues of the middle class.
The community already has a lot of answers and systems in place about how to make things work. Now I think our role as a whole city is to make sure that those voices are heard and those solutions are amplified.
That's the sort of the miracle of the middle class, is that they can become the engine that really drives growth in our community.
So I think to be able to pull this together quickly and then go is going to feel very different in Dane County. But I'm personally very excited about that. I think we'll get some new energy. I think we'll get some great ideas.
This is a community with one of the longest histories of research into what interventions actually work when it comes to building a strong middle class and supporting distressed communities.
When the goal is finding better ways to stabilize and expand the middle class, the stakes are particularly high.
I think that the energy is here in this community, the will is here in this community, the smarts are in this community, and to get people together in new and innovative ways, to think differently and to learn quicker and to try things faster, that's going to be what really gets us from here to there, and that's what we need.
We want you to get involved. Come to a community forum, submit your ideas, join a team. We will help build at least 10 teams from members of the community and campus around the strongest ideas. One of these ideas will receive additional funding from Schmitt Futures in 2019. To learn more and share your ideas, visit our website.
Now the question is, how do I get out?
Just click on the top part.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much. All right, so this project is transformative. So we've been doing the Wisconsin idea ever since we started over 50 years ago, but we've never had to do something like this that's so local with such a specific target to get done, and in a quite frankly, bananas timeline. So I'll talk about that a little bit. But it's been really, really exciting, and I think all the work that we've done up till now really helps with it. The kind of solutions that we're looking for, this really is to build, again, it's Wisconsin idea. So we required, so all four schools are doing this a little bit differently, but we require that there's a community-university partnership on each of the teams. We are really, I think it's very important that it's benefiting and drawing from diverse communities, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. That it's interdisciplinary, of course that it's evidence-based, and that it's responsive to Dane County community needs. So, you know, one of the first things we did was we sort of put together this fact sheet about Dane County, and hopefully you noticed also in the video, one of the very striking things about Dane County is that on average we look great. You know, people are doing really well, but we have terrible disparities by race and ethnicity. So, you know, median income for African American families is half of what it is for white families. Half. So we really felt that if we were going to do this kind of initiative, we have to address that head on. And one of the challenges that we had, you know, Schmitt Futures, you might have heard the phrase middle class a few times. And there were some people saying, well, why is the Institute for Research on Poverty doing something on the middle class? And why are we doing something on the middle class anyway? Schmitt Futures really feels like, you know, that we don't have enough research about what I would call really the fragile middle class. So if we're going to say, you know, here's an income line, and we were careful not to do this, and I'll explain why, but pretend there is one. We're really thinking about families that, you know, what can they do to get here? To have stable housing, good job, you know, feel comfortable if there's an emergency. And also, what can we do for families that are doing okay today, but say there's a car accident, say there's a flood, you know, like we've had in Dane County, and how is that going to potentially spiral them into a really troublesome situation? How can we prevent that? The other thing that we had to really think about in Dane County, and why we didn't put you know, a specific income number, is that if we just said, well, middle class is 40,000, we've basically said, well, this, you know, this initiative is not for African American families, and we certainly did not want to do that, right? So we also talked about what's the missing middle class in Dane County, and how can we address that? So that's been really enriching. We've employed a couple of community outreach folks as part of the grant. We've been working with graduate students as well as the faculty members, some of which who you saw, and a lot of community leaders on this project. And this is the crazy timeline that I told you about. So this started in May, and we have already gotten to the point where we're narrowing it down. We've narrowed it down to actually 11 proposals that received $10,000 in development funding. So it's got a little element of Shark Tank to it, and that'll be narrowed down to 3. We have an amazing community university review panel with just wonderful people from the community, facilitated by Annette Miller of Equity by Design. If any of you know her, she's amazing. We're going to narrow it down to 3, and then those 3 get to go pitch their idea to Schmitt Futures at the end of January. And then Schmitt Futures will pick at least one of our ideas, so at least one of the ideas from each of the 4 schools to support further. And then there's like a big pool of capital money, sort of, in the millions, that they will compete for in June. So it's pretty exciting. We're also in for a round 2. So this has been nonstop fun, and we're going to do it all again in 2019. So I don't know if any of you put in ideas for Dream Up this time around, but we certainly hope that you will in round 2 if you didn't. And so this has been really exciting for us because we've done a lot of public outreach and trying to get out into the community with faculty. We had some kickoff events for the community. We had this great opportunity to have office hours where we would just hold open office hours, sometimes at IRP, sometimes at South Madison Partnership. And it was just really cool to see these, kind of impromptu partnerships happen. So, at this particular meeting at the bottom, we had, a new faculty member who was just new to campus who met, someone from Union Cab, and they put together a proposal about providing transportation. And, now hopefully that's a relationship that'll live on. This is summarizing. Essentially, we also went out and interviewed people in the community to ask them, what are the challenges, of living in Dane County? So I'm going to finish up here because I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions. But these are our summer semifinalists. Hopefully you'll be reading about this in the paper over the next couple days. It's public, but we haven't gotten our press release out quite yet. But you'll see that there are really some creative ideas that have to do with workforce development, with childcare, with transportation, with legal barriers to employment, energy, financial security, health, and medical debt, the food system. So we were just absolutely thrilled with the response from the community. And we're more excited about the long-term goals of this project. So yes, there is an exciting big pool of money and opportunity with a big name organization. But really the gift of that we've been given with this opportunity is that we are able to build some infrastructure at IRP to really try to do some localized problem solving. So our immediate goals is that we're going to improve the lives of the local families, and this portfolio of 10 and 11 ideas is really, to us, that's the most important deliverable, and trying to move those forward and continue this kind of work. So I'll wrap up. We are really excited to engage with anyone who wants to help us realize the Wisconsin idea. So for those of you who are students out there, these are a few of our programs that, again, although we don't have classes, we do have these different kinds of opportunities. So I would encourage you to learn more about them. And also, general public, again, we'd love to see you at any of our events and using our publications, but also just participating, right? So keep checking out Dream Up. We've got, like I said, another round to go. And I want to hear from you in the Q&A. What are some ways that we can be working with you locally or whatever your expertise and background is? So, all right, with that, questions? Oh, thank you. And do I call on people, or is there a chosen person who calls on people? I'm fine either way. So, okay, Marilyn, I'll let you.
Your very first slide about the questions you're addressing.
Yes.
A lot of them were hows,
Mm-hmm.
which presumes a connection. Has the connection already been researched, and that's how you got to how?
Well, what an excellent question. Let me bring up that slide so I can just look at an example. This is the one thing I'd say is this is a select list, so there certainly are more questions to be had, but. How does family structure affect poverty? So that's an example, right? So the answer might be not at all. That could be true.
The pre-question of
Mm-hmm.
does it has
Yep.
not actually been researched yet. It's part of this question.
It's within, I think you could incorporate it into the how if you would allow it to be how does it? It does not. Not at all. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
What's been the response to the report that came out that said although the economy is doing well, poverty rates increased in Wisconsin? That runs counter to the idea that we just need to be more innovative and have a better economy and
right.
raise all boats.
Right. I think the reaction has been, what's going on, right? Because it seems like that shouldn't happen. And I think what we really have to dig into is why aren't really low-income adults able to gain employment? Why are families not getting access to benefits that they might be eligible for? So I think those are, some of the questions that we're trying to dig into. But it's also an opportunity when you have this, this strong economy and this tight labor market. This is the opportunity to really work on, disengaged workers or people who have struggled, and it's an opportunity to really kind of test and experiment and think about how and what kind of benefits really work to help families. So it's digging into that.
If I could follow up on how many cases does it take to disprove the idea that the economy is a sufficient solution?
How many cases? I don't know. I don't know if I can put a number on it, but I think it's more looking at the trend. So I think it ticked up, like 1 or 2% or something like that. But, the fact that poverty ticked up at all, to me, that's a red flag. That's something that we need to be looking at. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why Dane County?
Why Dane County for Dream Up? Yeah, great question. I think they sort of floated Milwaukee first, which I think Schmitt Futures was like, well, we know that, for example, there's been a lot of work on programs for families in poverty and some of the issues in Milwaukee, and they really did want to focus more on middle class. The other thing about Dane County is that it's where the university is. So as much as this is an exciting opportunity to think about improving economic well-being for families, we are also starting to realize that this is somewhat of an experiment with Schmitt Futures in trying to think about how can universities be change agents. So I think that was really important to them and wanting to have the university be part of it. The other thing about Dane County is that it is this interesting test case because you have sort of on average wealth, but you have it that belies these really stark disparities among certain groups. You also have some urban and some rural areas, so that was of interest too. So there's your answer. We don't know if the next challenge will still just be Dane County. It may be a different catchment area, but that's why it was chosen the first time around. Mm-hmm.
So I also have a question about Dream Up Wisconsin, which I found to be a really interesting example of what IRP does for a couple of different reasons. But one of the reasons is that that example, I think, goes to the heart of an issue that has been discussed in this Wisconsin Idea lecture series in class since it was inaugurated in 2016. Mm-hmm. And that is the question of the relationship between sort of expertise, scientific expertise, university expertise on the one hand, and let's call it folk knowledge on the other hand.
Yep.
So I was intrigued that the way that this is described in the video is that it's a kind of bottom-up process.
Yeah.
So that community members are being asked to put forward ideas or proposals. And so I guess my question for you is, you mentioned a moment ago the university is a change agent. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to understand how the sort of folk knowledge or how the knowledge that the community is bringing, their ideas, interface with the expertise of IRP. And so is the role of IRP there to kind of evaluate those ideas, to screen those ideas? How do you see those things sort of interconnecting, I guess?
I love that question. So I think the university's role is to bring our expertise to bear but not to define, and also to try to leverage the kind of expertise we don't have for us to work together, right? So we may have different kinds of knowledge. So we thought it was really important. One of the first things we did is we went out and tried to interview people, just really quick interviews, at bus stops, at festivals, at grocery stores, at libraries, and just asking these quick questions of, no, really, like, what are your greatest costs right now? Like, what are, that's the kind of information that you can only get from the source. We can sit and think what it is, but that's really important. We learned really quickly that, it was, and we knew this going in, that it was going to be really important for us. There are tons of amazing organizations and individuals in this county who've been working on these issues forever. So for us to think that we can just kind of sweep in and bring some great ideas is crazy, right? So we knew that we needed to go to these different organizations and learn about who's working on this and what is it that they don't have that maybe the university does that could really bring some of their ideas to scale. So whether that's partially money, but whether it's technology, whether it's data, whether it's evaluation expertise. So I definitely don't see our role as like thinking this is a good idea or a bad idea. It's how can we partner together to actually make something new happen. So the other part of this Dream Up, and I think what is a challenge, with this project is that a lot of people said, well, we're trying to do this, but maybe we just need more funding or we just need to reach more people. And it's like, no, it's not. The question is, why hasn't this been done before? And what could we do differently this time? And what are the resources that we could bring? Mm-hmm.
You probably heard this, it might be on your FAQs, but certainly, today, and conservatives, certainly libertarians, and actually somewhat of a broad base of other people say, well, look at it, 1966, war on poverty. The social scientists have been working on this and government programs, and we're not seeing much progress.
Mm-hmm.
People are kind of cynical or skeptical about some of the work you're doing, other sociologists are doing.
Mm-hmm.
What answer would you have for those people?
I think that's fair, and that's why we have to keep working on it, right? And I think we have made progress in some areas, that I would point to. I think, if you look at, infant mortality, early childhood development, I think we've made a lot of progress in. I think we've made a lot of progress in, basic nutrition, kinds of things. But there are still these pretty intractable, kinds of problems that we still need to be working with. And we also need to think about how other pieces of context have changed, right? So how have families changed? How has family structure changed? Now, women are working. It's not, they're not staying at home and watching the kids. So how do we think about that? So even if you make progress, there's always kind of a new reality that you have to be responding to. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Last week, Karen Schneider talked about the relationships and the building of true trust and respect and understanding to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
So to really enact the Wisconsin idea. Can you speak to how that exists and,
mm-hmm.
and what the examples you've given tonight
mm-hmm.
In the processes of doing those quick, short interviews of people on the street, how are you building those relationships of understanding so you truly get to the why
mm-hmm.
these things exist?
Mm-hmm. So with Dream Up, there are a couple things I would talk about. So doing those interviews was really important. And we paid people for them. So, respecting that this is information that we're willing to pay for that we think is really important. I think that is speaking to that a little bit. I think the fact that we, really tried to use that as a data source for teams and say, look, you have to make sure that you're actually addressing some of the problems, that the community has identified. We're not telling you what they are, but, this is, that's really important. The other thing, we hired 2 amazing outreach specialists, Bridget Van Bellingham and Peng He, who have a lot of relationships already in the community, had been working with these organizations, and had trust built, and had that. I think it gives great integrity to the project. And I think continuing to listen, requiring that there's a community component to it. But, all those things that I'm talking about, things that we've done, but the reality is that's information we need. We're not just doing it to look like this is a community project, that we would not be successful if we did not do that. And I will say there are other universities that are doing it differently, that, some have where they're just saying, here are 10 faculty members that are going to be in charge of teams, and maybe they'll do some community outreach. There are some that are statewide, but it's a little bit more removed, of like, you put stuff in online. They weren't necessarily going out and doing face-to-face outreach. But we just really felt in Dane County, you couldn't do anything but what we did, and to be successful. And the other example that I would give about building trusting relationships is our work, with the state agencies. And, that's been ongoing work, since the 1980s, that they've really been trying to do this. And, having that trusting relationship, knowing that we are going to build a research agenda together, that's really important, that we're going to try to make sure that we answer questions that are important to them and present information back to them, and listen to their feedback about how it's going on the ground, and incorporate that into our work, that they can trust that we'll only use the data for purposes that are going to be helpful, to them, and that we're going to be really good about using the data in a safe way. Those are all pieces of trust that get built up, and I learned from Karen, who's the greatest, but also having worked on the agency side, really understanding the importance of that. It's crucial. You cannot do this work without that. There's a question back there.
I was wondering, did you take into account criminal records in measuring poverty?
Yeah, that's an area of work that we are absolutely very interested in, and sort of how that impacts people. So we have affiliates. Mike Masolia has done some great research in Wisconsin about some of the really disturbing rates of incarceration in the state. We have one of the Dream Up project finalists right now is a partnership between Legal Action and the law school here, and it's looking at ways to try to reduce barriers to employment. And a really important one is looking at, for someone with a criminal record, are there options to maybe expunge that record, or how can we move forward? So I think that's I mentioned our last Lampman lecture was The Color of Law. So absolutely important, strong, and difficult ties to incarceration and poverty. We also did a lot of work on looking at, for example, the way child support debt can build up while a parent is incarcerated, and how the problem when they get out, how that can be a really difficult thing to overcome and problematic, or getting incarcerated for not paying child support. Is that a productive policy? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a sense about both the Dream Up and other things you've talked about of what are sometimes called scalable, scale-up programs. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if there's not some dimension of this that is really artisan work, meaning like the sustainable agriculture movement, in fact, kept using the word scale up. Mm-hmm. I could never understand it because it was totally based on the uniqueness of a particular setting and a particular scale, and yep. So forth and so on. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that some of what I've read about poverty, you get down to cases, and they are absolutely unique. Yep. They're medical problems, they're previous incarceration, you've got a one-off, and if you're going to moved that person out of poverty, that family out of poverty, you will have moved that family out of poverty. But what's going to work for them may not work for, you know, the person next door or the person across the way. And so I would just wonder about that in terms of approaching these sorts of broad challenges.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I think you're very right, and I would say two things. So one is that, you know, some of the research we do, and I talked probably more than I should have about like big data and some of the big projects that we're doing. And, you know, I think the value of that is that you have something that on average can move a needle or can move a needle for a lot of people. But you absolutely are correct in that, you know, there's a distribution to everything, right? So something I didn't talk about enough is that we have some amazing qualitative researchers who do ethnography. So Jane Collins, Kathy Eden is an affiliate of ours. And one of the things that I think IRP has become very good at is that even when we do, for example, like this humongous 8-state randomized controlled trial. So yes, we have a really rigorous research design for that impact analysis for looking at, you know, does this actually cause people to, you know, to pay more child support? But we also have an implementation evaluation going on at the same time where we're collecting tons of contextual information so that, exactly right, we can look at, you know, okay, here was the average impact, but, you know, why did it work better in Colorado versus, you know, New Hampshire, or why did it work better for some families versus others, or what are some things, the learning exchange that we just did with DCF about findings from that implementation study had great information about what child support offices were doing to try to motivate their workers to sign people up for the program. And they came up with these really creative things, like they had a traveling trophy, or they had, you know, like you got a party if you signed up 50 people, or different things like that. So that kind of information is so important and so rich, and it is a part of what we do. I just didn't talk about it enough. So thank you for asking.
I have a follow-up, which is in a different frame. There was a book years ago called Sweet Charity. It was about the emergency food system.
Okay.
Janet Opendijk, I believe, was her name. And it was an incredible example of really looking at the systems that were operating. And in her closing chapter, she had a very, very sort of downer observation. And that was that the things that people do to try to prevent hunger in America feel so good to the people that do them that you might have to invent people who needed emergency food to keep these institutions happy. And that's sort of the question of, are there instances out there in poverty programs which actually do not work but are widely celebrated by volunteers, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, is there questions about getting something out of the way that's not really doing much for raising the poverty level of the people involved?
Yeah, that is a danger in this kind of research for sure, because people love programs. If they have a program, they usually really like it, you know, and they can say, but I know I'm making a difference. You know, people tell me they like the program, or that kind of thing. So, you know, but we are in the business of trying to figure out how do we best use the very limited resources that we have. So that's why it's really on us to do the best kind of most rigorous research that we can, to think about context, but yes, you know, that is a challenge. Oh my gosh, so many questions. I haven't heard from you yet. Oh, sorry, Tom, there's one more and then I'll get you. Yep.
You briefly mentioned that when defining middle class, you, I guess, more conventional categorizations excluded a huge sector of the population. So what steps, I guess, we're taking to, I don't know, like, recognize the missing middle class or include the missing, like, how is that?
Yeah, a good question. And this was something we really struggled with. And again, some universities were like, oh, it's this, percentage on either side of the median income, in our catchment area. And, we went back to Schmitt Futures and we're like, we can't do that. We don't want to do that because it's not going to really capture the population that we're most interested in. And to their credit, they were like, well, that's fine. We're not telling you how to define it. We want you to localize it. We want you to really work with your population. I will say some teams push back on it though too, because they're like, who the heck are we supposed to be targeting, with our programs? And we sort of pushed back and said, you tell us, who do you think needs this program? That's a terrible thing to say, need a program, but who do you want to impact? You define it and tell us why that's important for this community.
Well, this is really naive, I'm sure, but so this is all great. This is all about government and setting policy. When you talk about poverty, it's not just the input side; it's the consumption part of it. And at least in big cities, really big cities, the poor do pay more, pretty much across the board on consumer packaged goods and all kind of things. I don't know if that's true in Madison, but it's true in big cities. Have you ever engaged the private sector? The best deals at retail are offered to the people who need them least. There aren't a lot of poor people at Costco. If you sort of had the people's cost, if you sort of had mass discount, power buy for not the zip codes where Costco locates, or more modest neighborhoods. Couldn't you find an Eric Schmitt or a Howard Schultz or somebody who's kind of a progressive, wealthy person to get behind something like that?
So I totally think you should write that up and put it into our Dream Up pile of ideas, because that is exactly, so I think IRP, for sure, our research did start in the answers are in government and in policy. But I think that while that is still a really important part of what we do, it's not, there definitely is an understanding that the private sector has to play a role, and especially in Dream Up, I think Schmitt Futures really wants us to try to engage that private sector more. And your idea is very interesting, and another area we have some of our one of the emerging scholars that whose picture I put up, Jacob Favor, is doing some really interesting work in looking at neighborhoods and how certain financial services. So this, that it's expensive to be poor. What they have to pay for banking or payday loans and different things. So he's doing some really, really interesting work on the sort of the geography of poverty and those kinds of services. So that is an issue that I think in a lever,
Payday loans.
Yep.
And if states were really serious about getting rid of poverty, you wouldn't use state money to buy ad media for state lotteries. You would.
Write it up, man. That's it. I love it. I love it. Any other questions or questions we should add to our FAQ page or Dream Up ideas? Or?
I'm just struck by Tom's comment, because if you look at the progressive era, you find a huge number of highly educated people that were absolutely in favor of prohibition. And they were in favor of it because they knew what the total cost to society was. Some people would argue that the well-off people that were in favor of prohibition knew that it wouldn't affect them. They would find ways around the law. They wanted poor people to not be able to spend their money on alcohol. But it is an interesting set of questions about how you take these negative goods out of a world. And So
There's a really good Wall Street Journal analysis about why states don't want to get poor people to quit smoking. Because people who smoke tend to die fairly early, actually, don't increase healthcare costs, and the tax on a pack of cigarettes is so high that California, Illinois, etc., would be severely hurt if they really, but once it got down to 15% of adults smoking, and they're mostly poor people, gee, policy concern just kind of didn't see this present.
Yeah. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal this last week about the post-Trump conservative approach, people who are very bright people who don't necessarily like President Trump, but are trying to look at what's a conservative anti-poverty policy look like. What do you do? And some of it is exactly these cost-saving kinds of things and so forth. It was an interesting thing to me. I didn't know about the research that they were naming and so forth.
And I think that, the key, and it's very important for us to be nonpartisan and we don't advocate for particular policies. We're really trying to just bring the research to bear because I think, again, you have to, but the common ground you can get to is the outcome, right? Like we want the same outcome. So can Gwen ask one more question? And
sure,
then
one more question and we'll wrap it up.
Great.
So do you have any, they talk about how there is an oncoming silver tsunami of
aging,
but just aging, dementia. And so I'm wondering about the poverty effects of caregiving and dementia, and whether there are any studies focusing on that yet.
Yes, so one of the things I would point you to so one of the Russell Sage Foundation pieces is about what would sort of a guaranteed income package for elderly look like. And there's also, Wisconsin has this incredible data set called the Wisconsin Longitudinal Study. Have you had anybody from there? Okay, right. So they do some caregiving work because so I think this research is just sort of starting to understand what the impact is. It's absolutely really related to poverty because, for example, maybe it's families who aren't able to work and they're having to stay home, or or it could be people who are working as CNAs that are, not making very much money, and there's no career ladder. So those are all related issues that we're absolutely looking at. Rural poverty, where you don't have access to beds and care. So I think there's going to be, a lot of work coming out about that in the next few years. So, thank you so much for this opportunity.